Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Raptors Republic is Doing Stuff. This episode, a film room with professional scout Josh Codinera, who has joined me to talk about Jaden Bradley and Allen Graves. This will feature more Jaden Bradley coverage and breakdown because I already have a big video on Allen Graves, but we will be discussing Allen Graves as well. Josh, the first thing I want to know from your perspective as a scout is why do you think that Jaden Bradley was picked, and why do you think Allen Graves was picked by the Raptors?
I think what's interesting about Bradley to start off with him, he's kind of like a stabilizing guard, a two-way guard that makes good decisions on both sides of the floor, and he's also a guy that he's very comfortable in physicality. And I think with the team wants to play with high pickup points, with kind of creating a lot of events as far as defensive turnovers and stuff like that. I think someone like Bradley, who played with Burries, played with Koa Pete, guys that are very physical and that can play up to the touch. I think he's a good decision maker as far as how he anticipates reads defensively and how he anticipates rotation. He just, maintains the shell of the defense well once he's in that type of system. And then I think likewise with Graves, he's someone who also makes great decisions and also creates a lot of events, who has great hands. And I think building that out and continuing to add pieces to that identity, I think is useful for rotation pieces as this team grows.
In terms of your analysis of these guys, do you think that either one of them is a steal in any sort? Like, do you like them more than where they were drafted, for example?
Not really, to be honest.
What do you think is the key to each one's upside? We'll start with Graves first. Like, what do you think unlocks what people saw when they say he could be a top 10 prospect? What do you think actually makes that come to fruition?
He's a very cerebral player. A lot of the feel for his game, the reads he makes, both offensively and defensively, just it's not stuff that you can teach. So guys that come into the league, you're trying to look for like a steal. If you can find some like outlier development in his shooting, outlier development or in his handle, or one of those things hits, that feel for the game and just being able to make like pinpoint reads, helping guys get open as far as like screening and cutting to the basket or making connective reads, and kind of like what Draymond did as far as like being like a cerebral player, not being the best athlete, but then he's not a negative on offense. He's actually a positive on offense as far as like passing and screening goes. And I think that's useful in the NBA offense.
And Jaden Bradley, we see every once in a while one of those second round guards. It just kind of clicks for them. In terms of what you've described Bradley as prior to what I'm about to ask you, it seems like he is a very conservative player in a lot of sense. But what do you think would make him more dynamic? Is it a decision-making leap? Is it a jump shooting leap? Like, what do you think the answer is there?
I think it's a shooting leap. He has a good mid-range shot, and I think if that can develop, I think it's just focusing a little bit more on his balance. Like as somebody that trains people in shooting and in basketball development as well, player development, I feel like there's a little tweaks that he can do both offensively and defensively that can help him a lot. As far as like what his upside is that shot making ability. Maybe there's, I don't want to compare him to DeMar, but there's those DeMar type elements where he's a two motion shooter. He's comfortable with physicality, and then he has good footwork on his mid range. I think there's that avenue for those type of shots in his game, and I think that's where that little bit of upside is.
So the first thing we're looking at is how Bradley creates on drives and what that looks like.
He uses a lot of rejects when it comes, and that's how he gets downhill. He has that left to right crossover, and then that second dribble is really powerful. That just allows him to like power through a guy. A little bit more potential than Jamal Shed in that way, where Jamal kind of likes to go all the way to the rim, or he has that little floater, whereas Bradley can shoot over the top a little bit. He's a really physical driver, so he's really comfortable in those gaps with the defender on his hip. 31.3% of his shots come at the rim, and he draws fouls at like a 0.56 free throw rate.
That's huge.
Yeah, that's strong for a guard. And if you look at his frame, he's strong. He can absorb contact, and at 6'3", that's like legit guard size. And I think that's different than with like Jamal and with Chucky, he's a much bigger and a little bit stronger than, I think.
So something that really does stick out to me in these drives is that he's not getting the angle initially. Like his burst is not typically creating the avenue to the drive that he ends up getting, but he has a stick-to-itiveness really in these drives, and that he drives the hip regardless if he gets past it at first. And this could end up being something that's actually like troublesome if he's a bad decision maker. But that willingness and comfort with physicality at the next level, if he's a good decision maker and takes what's given and is able to kind of work his way further downhill and use it for, I guess, playmaking leverage, that comfortability with physicality could really pay off. I think some big dividends at the NBA level.
Despite him finishing 48.9% at the rim this year, I think there's upside with a better spacing context. The previous year, I think he was just under 60%. So his physicality allows him to create opportunities that NBA spacing, I think there's a little bit more opportunity for him to develop there.
So the next big thing is that you kind of fancy yourself and look at, jump shot mechanics. I'm curious about what you think about Bradley's jumper going forward. If you want to stick with the mid-range, that's fine. But what do you think about his jumper in general?
He does have a bit of a two motion shot, and we've talked about this before with Grady Dick and how that translation's a little bit tougher. Just the core strength required for that, especially at the NBA level, especially at the distance of the NBA three, and the physicality you have to fight through for that. A lot of Jaden's threes came at corner threes, and he was just kind of left wide open just off of like cuts or him spacing out to the corner. And I think that's why he shot a decent percentage at 40%, was that he was left open. Looking at his jump shot, I think there's an avenue for him to grow with his set shot. I think he leaves a little bit off on the table where when his feet is not set, he tries to generate a little bit extra force from the right side of his body, where his right leg sweeps to the right a little bit, just to generate a little bit more power. If he's able to kind of get like a little bit more spaced out, a little bit more strength in through his hips, so similar to the way that Andrew Nembhard has took a little bit of a leap as a 3-point shooter, I can see him fixing that as far as like being able to become a better set shooter and catch and shoot threat. And that was his best percentage as far as shooting goes, was his set shot.
Okay, so defense. He is sold as I think he's sold as a defense first guard from what I've heard. That's how Trey talked about him when we talked about him at first, and I had hardly seen any of Jaden prior to that. He's supposed to be a dog. He's supposed to have that oomph in terms of like applying pressure. He's supposed to be good in digging after the ball, all this kind of stuff. What's your sniff test on his defense at this point?
I am a bit lower on his defense than most, because I think there's a little bit of, just as far as like the way he moves and his movement patterns, and as far as like his defensive stance goes, I don't think he moves as well as the way that he's viewed as. There's a bit of reaction speed issues. I think he's too upright in his stance, where he can be flat-footed, and that affects his ability to kind of navigate screens, to switch, or to just kind of change directions at the NBA level will be very, I wouldn't say difficult for him, but I think there's some ways that I think he can grow, because he doesn't have that ability to like plant hard and almost like a skier, change directions, push off and move in that lateral direction to cut off a man or to catch up. And I think there's a little bit of some mechanical things that you can work on with the strength and conditioning at the NBA level that can help with that, and let's see if he grows in that space. But I am a little bit lower on his defense, than especially at the point of attack, than most.
And in terms of making reads off ball, like I know you have some film here where, especially the blind doubling, I know that Arizona did do blind doubling, although not at the frequency that the Raptors were obviously doing blind doubles. When you think of like Jacoby Walter attacking guys constantly, like being a hunter on the floor and going out to see like, what can I do? How can I make a play? Arizona didn't ask the same frequency of Bradley, but he certainly is capable of identifying when a player is blind to him and then being able to attack a dribble or, a pickup or something like that. In terms of his, I guess, his sense or ability to read things off ball, what do you make of him as a defender?
I think that's his best attribute. I think he makes anticipatory reads really well. Like you said, attacking ball handlers on their turns. A lot of coaches at the college level like to tell their players to force turns, right? As an off-ball player, if you're able to make that read and understand like your spacing, and as far as like if you have the time to react to that, I think that's something where Bradley actually excels at. Attack the ball and go for deflections. And I think that's where his 3.5% steal percentage comes from, is that he's able to make those anticipatory reads really well. Even as far as like being able to switch out, he's comfortable like making the corner switch or like scramming out. And he's not someone that you necessarily need to scram. He's okay with physicality against bigs. Yeah, that just allows him to, play up a little bit and not necessarily always have to guard on the perimeter. His awareness as a defender has grown a lot in college. I don't think, like, coming out, he was like a scorer type of combo guard type of thing. And I think at the end of the day, he's physical and he's willing to mix it up, and that's really useful on the defensive end, especially in the NBA.
So we're going to move on to Allen Graves. And of course, if you want like a really meaty look into it and a kind of a video essay look into the film, I have one, it came out like a week ago, maybe a little bit more. But myself and Josh, we got to talk about some daggum Allen Graves now. So Allen Graves, I think, is sold first and foremost as a collection of stats. A playmaker on the floor, a guy who shoots threes, a guy whose box score plus minus is huge. And despite when I was looking at the film, I thought he gave up a lot of baskets, but he plays into the possession maxing aspect of things. And, it's not entirely fair to say he gave up a lot of baskets without bringing in the context that Santa Clara, he didn't start, but in terms of their bigs, he played the most minutes. They had a 7'3", 7'2" guy who was their starting center who started games and only played 17 minutes per game. So they were asking Graves to run around like a madman and make plays. And it meant that he was out of position a lot of times just by propensity of his aggression. And it meant that he was constantly put in these playmaking decisions like, will he make the play? Won't he make the play? And what was impressive was how often he could get back to the right spot. But it also means we don't have a ton of tape of him playing a more conservative and easy to translate scheme, which is, I'm curious what you think about his physical gifts to perform, obviously, this like helter-skelter scheme at the NBA level, but also to play a little bit more like straight and narrow.
I think as far as being able to play a little bit more conservative would be a little bit tough for him at the NBA level, but doesn't necessarily mean that he won't be able to do it. I think there's a level of strength that he has that allows him to like body up players and jam up players early on. And also just, having great hands just allows him to like push guys off, cut them off their beat on their dribble pattern or something like that.
We don't really have film to break it down at the like granular level, but in terms of Graves' jump shot, what do you think about it? Is it very compelling to you? Do you think that it should translate to the next level? And how important do you think it is to his game that it does?
It's very important for his shot to develop at the NBA level. He's going to be a screen and pop or screen and slow roll type of guy. Being able to punish defenses with that shot is going to be so useful for him, so that he can make different types of reads. If he's just going to be played off and he's just making a pass along the top, it's going to keep the defense conservative. It's not going to allow them to rest a little bit. But if he's actually shoots, then he can punish those defenses. He can even drive because he has a little bit of a handle. As far as you asking me about how his shot looks, I do think he'll need to speed it up a little bit. I do think his setup is a little slow. He has a wide base, which is good, so he's always on balance. I do think with a wider base and also being a bigger guy, that takes a little bit slower to set up. I think he'll start off having the space and having those shots if he can punish that early on would be really beneficial to his career, and speeding up footwork, speeding up his shot mechanics as far as like being able to get from his set point up to his release point, I think will open up his game.
In terms of being a big man and doing the big man stuff, we know that he'll never be like a traditional big man defensively because you'll never have the size. But in terms of the screen craft and the decision making, do you think that he can comfortably, provided the shot is there, comfortably step into a lot of the roles that the Raptors ask of their big men, which, as far as I understand it, is if they can get it, shoot out of pick and pop like Mamu did, set screens like Jakob did, make reads out of delay action or as a hub in the high post. Like, how do you feel about his decision making in all of those situations?
At Santa Clara, it showed to be elite. As somebody who also coaches, I would love to have him on my team. Because he always keeps the window open for your guards. He always screens, he re-screens, and then when he does pop out, having the ability, like the feel for that timing, when to slow roll or when to late roll, those are pockets of time that takes a while for players to develop, and most players actually don't develop that because that timing just is not really taught. It's just you're told to be like, okay, yeah, can you late roll here? Then you're just like, okay, when do I go? When do I make that read? Whereas like you can tell Graves is feeling out that window of time. He's looking at his guard. He's maintaining that distance and also that window that you can make that pocket pass. And he's also like making reads to where that rotation is going to come when he's on the move. And that's a super useful skill. And I think the stuff that Mamu was asked to, I think he's probably not going to be as good of a play finisher. But as far as like a decision maker, I really enjoy what Graves does as far as that. I would love to coach him if I had that chance. Yeah.
So there you have it, folks. Jaden Bradley, Allen Graves, a little bit of film, a lot of insights from Josh Codinera. You can find him. Josh Scout him on Twitter, J-Code himself. I'm, of course, Samson Folk. Thanks for tuning in with us. We hope that you learned something about Bradley and Graves before Summer League, and honestly, just before they actually take off as professional players with the Toronto Raptors. Anything you want to say before we get out of here, Josh?
Take care, everybody.
That's excellent. Oh, yeah, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hype. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.